the history of the competition for power. The history of the competition for power goes back to the history of life on the planet Earth and evolution. Evolution began when the first life form was successful, and it was a binary process that created evolution. That's how evolution works. A binary function, just like a computer. Computer is all about a switches, on, off. That's all that makes up a computer. A bunch of switches, on or off. That's the same way evolution works. Success or failure. What is success? Success is creating a different but similar offspring. That's success. It needs to be different so there can be change, and it needs to be similar so that some of those traits that enabled the original to be successful are passed on. So that simple binary process of success and failure created complex organisms, the human, ending in the human being. The human being with a brain that had the ability to imagine. Now, imagination led to the creation of tools, and it led to the competition for power. Because the competition for power is a competition for a fantasy, a plan, if you want to call it that. And a plan is just a fantasy that you want to make real. Now, there are people all over the globe and all throughout time, or throughout the history of the human race, that have had different fantasies of how they want the world to be. And they've had the ability to make that fantasy a reality. The only thing stopping them is other human beings and perhaps science and nature, or science. So that's how the competition for power began. When the human race came into existence, it separated away from evolution and success and failure. No longer is our goal success. Like every other organism, every other life form is still based on success and failure. They're trying to be successful. All our emotions, all our everything was created all about being successful. But then when we began to imagine, to fantasize, we no longer worried about being successful. We do things that are going against being successful, all in hopes to create this fantasy. And the human existence revolves around fantasy. The reason why people are scared of the dark, because our minds work in a way that when there's darkness, when there's an unknown, we fill it in with fantasy. So when there's darkness, you imagine monsters or killers or something in the dark. So imagination is what humans do, but it also is what created the competition for power. We imagine how we want the world to be. We're unhappy with the way it is, and we know we could change it. So we're always trying to change it. We're always trying to make that fantasy. But the problem is the difference, going back to evolution, the difference that were necessary in evolution now create the competition for power, since we're all different. And we all want a different fantasy. We all have a different idea of how we want the world to be. So we're all trying to get K-power, which is the power to get everyone to submit to our fantasy, the fantasy of how we want the world to be. If someone is eventually successful, then they can move to step 3, which is construction. Every time we build something, there are 3 steps: plan, power, construction. We all have our plan. Well, not all of us, but Most of us have a plan or a fantasy of how we want the world to be, but we don't have the power. So we're trying to get the power, and the leaders of the world are trying to get the power, but the competition for power is not a competition of nations, it's a competition of individuals. If an individual can develop a technology that can allow them to take over the world, they don't need a nation. Nations help give someone power. People help give some power, but technology is reducing that number.